Sid Snitkin, and I'm in charge of the cybersecurity at ARC, the team that does the research. I lead it, if you want to call it that. And, you know, we're really great to see you today, and I guess I get the honor of welcoming you to the 26th, I think, annual ARC Forum in Orlando. We're thrilled to be back here again alive. Hopefully we're all safe and stay safe and everything like that. I want to mention too that this, just because I find it interesting, this is the 10th year that we've had a cybersecurity sessions, that cybersecurity has been part of our program. You know, one thing unique about our program is it's not just a cybersecurity program, it's a cybersecurity track or program within a much bigger event. So we've been doing it for 10 years, and I still remember 10 years ago, I was involved in that. We had this one room, and we had about 15 people who sat there and discussed patching of Windows systems that were going obsolete at the time. How are we going to deal with that? I don't know if you all remember those kind of things, but, and now, and last year, well, last year we had virtual, but now, you know, we've got literally a full room again. That's wonderful, of people that are talking about different things. So we're just thrilled for that, so welcome. Now, let me introduce you to the other people on the cybersecurity team, the ones who really do all the stuff, I would say. There's Mark Lusiv. I don't know if you guys want to stand. Yeah, if you will stand, please stand, the guys. And then there's Larry O'Brien, who's right here. Eric Kosman. Where's Eric? Eric is over there. And Alex. Where's Alex? Is he in here? There you go. I don't know if you knew you were on the slide, but you made the slide. Alex, the newest guy on the team. So anyhow, if, you know, please don't hesitate to come up to any of us during the event or even afterwards. You know, our email addresses are there, but we're happy to give you our email addresses. You know, if there's any questions about what we do at ARC for cybersecurity and stuff. Can everybody hear me okay, by the way? I tend to move around a lot, as you could tell. Okay. Now, the other thing I want to do is mention about our sponsors. And if you look at this slide, this event's sponsored, I don't know how many sponsors. We had very strong sponsorship for the event this year. And this is by no means all the sponsors, but I just put the ones here, certain ones for a purpose. At the very top, you're going to see all of the automation companies, the leading automation companies in the world, and they've been sponsoring our events for years. And the reason I put them on this slide and didn't put in a lot of other software companies that also are here, that do manufacturing software and so on, is I just wanted to make the point in general that, again, one thing is different with our cybersecurity. I just want you to think about this, is that ours is embedded in a program that's much bigger. And our entire program at this event is around developments in the industrial space. I use the term industrial, but it's very broad. It has smart cities, there's all kinds of different things, and all the things that are happening. And most of the things that are happening have an impact on cybersecurity. So even though you're here today, and I'm going to encourage you to go to all the cybersecurity sessions, I just want to make sure you take advantage of all the other sessions that are there, because you're going to see what's happening that's going to affect you from a cybersecurity perspective. And then at the very bottom are 10 sponsors who specifically are sponsoring our event with cybersecurity. I want to thank them very much, and I want to encourage you to stop at their booths. And we're going to talk about this a little later. One thing I want to mention here too, I may as well mention it right here, is around networking. One of the main things we find people get out of this event, you know, of course, as an analyst, I think, oh, everybody comes to hear me talk, but that's not true. Hopefully you do enjoy that. But it's more to network with other people, and we find this is a great networking event, and we want to encourage you to connect with other people and with suppliers and things like that. And I'll be mentioning it. We have a session at the end of the day where we're going to try to facilitate that. So network is a key focus of what we're trying to do, and let everybody else talk about, share what they're doing, share their experiences. So now, one more thing before we actually get to my presentation is about our program today. Now, if you look at the part in the orange there at the top, that's today's workshops. And we have the whole day, a series of workshops. This first one, I call it Industrial Cybersecurity Today and Tomorrow. And then following this, we're going to have a separate workshop, and all of these are 90-minute long, a separate workshop, which is a panel discussion about securing industrial connected workers, which is an area I've been doing a lot of research on and I think is really, really important. Then we're going to have a break for lunch. And when the lunchtime comes, we'll have boxed lunches out in the lobby there. And what we've done is we've providing you entertainment, lunchtime entertainment. And that's in the form of 4 of our sponsors are going to give presentations. Now, I've asked them, and they've always been good in the past about this, not to make a sales pitch. I always warn them, if you start to do a sales pitch, people are going to get up and leave. You don't have to sit there, but the idea is go get a box lunch, come back and sit, and this room will be broken in half. So pick one or the other. One side will have Fortinet at the beginning, and then on the other side will be Armis. And then after that session, which they each have 45 minutes, you'll see that we're going to then, oddly, I mean, there's logistics reasons for this, but then we're going to have 2 more luncheon presentations in the next 2 rooms, okay? So just be careful of that. So it's a little different than it used to be. Then we're going to come back, and I believe we're going to have this entire room again, and we're going to have a workshop on managing ransomware and supply chain risks, which is a really hot topic today, very difficult, challenging issue. And that'll be led by my colleague, Eric Kosman. And then we're going to have a final session today. We're calling it Birds of a Feather Networking. And you'll see what that is. We keep trying to facilitate networking, and we're going to try a little different this time. Give everybody a chance to try to connect with other people, okay? We'll see how that works, as well as help you kind of go to know which suppliers you want to talk to. So that's just today. Then during the main forum that starts tomorrow, if you look, we have 2 sessions tomorrow afternoon. Oh, yeah, 6 o'clock networking event. Yeah, here I'm talking network. Anyhow, so we have a big reception tonight. It's very nice. It's in the showcase area. But then tomorrow, during the main day, tomorrow, Tuesday, in the afternoon, we have 2 cybersecurity sessions. We call them cybersecurity case studies. And those are ones where we ask you to, a difference, I'm really taking a long time here, but the difference between today and the rest of the week, today we talk about topics, things like connected workers, managing supply chain risks. During the main forum, what we did is we chose to have case studies where we have people come and talk about projects they've done, what problems they had, how they solved them, and things like that. That's the general concept. So we have 2 cybersecurity case study sessions tomorrow, and then on Wednesday we have another session on cybersecurity and energy transition that Larry O'Brien's going to be leading all of these ones tomorrow and Wednesday. And then at the very bottom, notice I kind of highlighted in yellow. I hope you can see these slides. I can't see them as well as you, hopefully you can. But all of these sessions are being recorded, and they're going to be put online in a virtual event, the one we used last year for our virtual forum. We're using it again. So I think it says on the June 20th or something, then it's supposed to open up. So you can go there and you'll be able to look at any session. So if you miss something live here, you'll be able to go and look at the replay. And then another point I want to make is we have some speakers who couldn't make it for whatever reason, COVID and somewhere out of the country and things like that. But anyhow, so we have several sessions, recordings by people from like Goya, for example, is one of them. We have some others too. I don't remember the names of the companies, unfortunately. But anyhow, so we'll have some additional things there. Now, last thing, logistically, is I have these 3 little, I'll call them icons. The first thing is vFairs. If you have not, there's an app that we use for the forum, which can help you connect with people and find the schedule and do stuff like that. If you haven't downloaded it, we suggest you do that. If you need help, I believe there's help available out by registration. Now, when you rush out there and ask, if there's not, I'm sorry, but that's their problem then. But anyhow, that's the only thing I could recommend. I certainly am not going to explain it to you. The next one down is just about cell phones. You know, we always appreciate if you would turn off your cell phone during the thing, at least silence it. And then the very last thing, I'm told that we have surveys at the end of every session, and we encourage you to take that survey to let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. It's a very quick survey as far as I know. So with all that said, now let me get to the real topic of this session, and that's industrial cybersecurity today and tomorrow. And I'm going to kick this off with a short, hopefully short presentation. I can drift. If you haven't noticed, I like to talk. My perspective, an analyst perspective, by looking at the market, talking to lots of end users. And I'll give you that maybe as a half hour. And then Clint Walker from DHS, who's over there sitting, will come up and give you a presentation about what they're seeing and what kind of support they're helping and what kind of issues they're having or dealing with. So with respect to mine, now here's a model Probably a lot of you have probably seen it before. We've used it for many years at ARC, and we find this model is very handy. We developed this. It aligns with a lot of other structures that people use, but we developed this to try to help companies understand cybersecurity from the point of view. Particularly, we started at the bottom. You see like a stair step, and what that is are the steps that people should go through to secure their systems. We recommend people start on the left and work and do those things and go across to the right. You know, like first thing you do is identify all your assets, then you protect it, and that's endpoint protection and network security type solutions. Then you defend that system from outside attacks. And notice those are in blue. The blue are, I call them passive defenses, because there's ones you put in and they're expected to stop it for you, okay? But we all know today there's lots of things that get by that. So the stuff in the orange we call active defenses. And that's much more the detect and respond type of solutions. The other thing on that model I just want to highlight. So the bottom is just solutions, technology solutions. Above that line is something we find lots of companies miss, and that is the tools to manage that technology, to manage and help people use it. If you don't have those tools, you're not getting any value from it. You might get some, it might stop some malware, but it really isn't giving you the protection you want. And then at the very top, that bar is the kinds of cybersecurity resources that we have found people need in order to deal with the steps at the bottom. You start from the left. You know, years ago, this goes back to years ago too, it was mostly managed by OT people with very little cybersecurity knowledge, because what they were doing is some updates and patches and that. But as you go across and you start to do things like detection and response and looking at SIMs and tools like that, you need more cybersecurity expertise. So as you go across that model, we call that a maturity model, because as you go across, that kind of evaluates where you are from a maturity perspective. And it's actually saying the maturity equates to how much level of protection you have for that facility, okay? That's the essence of that model. And last point, well, I'll show you in a second here. That line right there, now, this is Sid Snitkin's interpretation. I look at the standards and all that kind of stuff for years. And I would say most of the industrial cybersecurity standards are about where that red line is. It's mostly focused around putting in protection, identifying your assets, putting in anti-malware, segmenting, that type of stuff, okay? The passive side. They keep getting updated. They're moving ahead, I would say, but they aren't quite up to where they're recommending that you go way over to the right, okay? Now, from the point of view of where are we today, this is where we think most companies are, a typical company. And if you look on the left, well, first of all, let me mention on the right is where we think IT cybersecurity programs are. Not every company, but big companies. Most companies have invested in cybersecurity people. They have a lot of tools to manage it. They have a lot of governance processes and stuff. And they pretty much have every kind of technology you could want, all right? When you look from the OT side particularly, you drool wishing you had some of those capabilities. Where the OT systems are more on the left. Now, from the point of view of technology solutions, which is at the bottom, we think most plants, again, it varies. There's certainly plants that have no protection today, but most plants, I find, have recognized. Years ago, we used to have, 10 years ago, part of our big thing was to encourage people to consider cybersecurity an issue. And we were talking about looking and educating people about the availability of standards. Today, we find most companies actually use the standards. They've invested in stuff pretty close to what's there by the red line. The only reason I don't think that they're quite at the red line is because remote access has become a big issue. I'll be talking about that in a minute. And I don't think most of them really have the kinds of security that we would recommend they have or that is available. It's more like they put a VPN connection in and they say, now we've got it secured. There's more that you have to do particularly. So they're almost there though. But if you look at the tools to help companies manage security, which is the next line up, they're behind that quite a bit. They just don't have the tools. And it's, people have invested in the things that were obvious to do the security, but they haven't done the extra stuff. And people, I think everybody knows people is a big issue. Most facilities don't have the people to do it. And the net effect of that, and this is a key reason why we use this model, is when you look at that, your overall security, your maturity is only as good as the weakest link. So in essence, it's where, more or less, where the people and the process stuff is, okay? Which is quite a bit behind. And people don't even know that. You know, a manager of a plant or whoever invests in it, pays the bill. He thinks that it's a single thing. I bought this stuff, I'm secure. And we all know that isn't true. So that's where we think the cybersecurity is today. Now let me talk about tomorrow, where we're headed. And I think some of this we're already there. And there's kind of three things that continue to change and continue to change the risks. The world, there's more challenging threats today. And I'd say this is never going to stop, in my opinion. There's increased connectivity and digital transformation. And all three of those things are creating more cybersecurity risks and different risks. So, and in each of those cases, as the risks increase, you have to go and do something to improve your defenses. And notice the last thing I'll mention in this little slide is just, notice I bring that loop back, because one thing we also talk about, and probably all of you know it too, is it's a journey. It's not a project, cybersecurity. You know, it's something you have to continue to monitor, continue to update, and do stuff like that. So now I want to just talk about each of those categories quickly, hopefully. First of all, let me talk about threats. As you know, as I think everybody's seen, years ago, again, the 10 years ago and in between, the big issue was just hackers and protecting and blocking malware from getting in. And in those days, you know, endpoint protection, anti-malware software, firewalls with rules for specific malware, you could deal with a lot of those just at that point. But over time, we see more and more sophisticated threats coming, and we're also seeing more targeted attacks happening. And you know, one reason this is happening is because, first of all, you know, there's malware markets out there today. I think you all know about that. You know, so what that's done is make it easier for someone to become a sophisticated attacker. You know, where before they may have just been, you know, I don't want to say a kid, but now you can get stuff that's really dangerous that'll get by the defenses, and you just go and buy it. And there's also people who sell just the access. They've already penetrated systems, and they'll sell you that access to that system. So malware markets is a big thing. And then the other thing is you know, there's a lot of smart defenders in the world. There's also a lot of smart attackers too. And it's like a game. So every time you come up with a new defense, they're finding a way to get around that defense. And it's not just finding that one vulnerability. You know, it's much more surreptitious than that. I mean, finding ways to exploit people, finding ways to get into stuff. I'd say the most recent kind of attacks that I think are really dangerous is stuff like supply chain attacks, where attackers, criminals have learned it's much, if there's lots of software or lots of suppliers that deal with lots of companies, why waste time chasing every company? Just go after that one supplier. If you can compromise him, let him penetrate all the other ones. Because the people, the end users, are happy to download from their trusted suppliers. So that's obviously a more sophisticated, surreptitious kind of approach. The other thing I'd say is industrial operations are definitely becoming targets for cyber extortion. I think you've all seen that. I mean, you know, Colonial Pipeline was a classic one, but there's others that are happening. And one of the reasons, at least other people say, and I can easily believe, is that's where the money is. You know, the cost of downtime is so high, people say, oh, they're gonna pay, they aren't gonna suffer those losses. And I think they have found that generally happens. And then also, I think the worst part, actually, I think a lot, is, you know, cyber becoming a weapon today. And I think it's become a convenient weapon. You know, when Stuxnet happened, we all said, oh, wow, that's dangerous. You know, everybody understood it could be used that way, but no one thought it would become commonplace. Today, I'd say it's commonplace for either stealing data, information, or worse, damaging equipment, stuff like that, like we're seeing today, you know, in parts of the world. Now, what does that mean? You know, to deal with these sophisticated attacks and the targeted attacks, the number one thing is, and these are things I think you're going to see happening, that's why I'm calling it tomorrow. These are changes I think you're going to see in your own program or other people doing. There's going to be that shift from just the passive defenses over more to the active. Because the only way to deal with these kinds of attacks, you can't stop them. You know, you might think you can, but you have to just assume that somebody's going to get in. So the best thing you can do, if you think of risk, you know, as likelihood time impact, You can't stop the likelihood much, but you can certainly reduce the impact. So, and the way to do that is to detect it as fast as possible and deal with it. And to do that, you need tools and things like that. So we're going to see that shift. The other thing I think we're going to see, this is more on the people side and things like that, is people and suppliers and stuff, is even if you do that, most companies still have a lack of resources. They're going to continue to have a lack of resources. But so I find more and more companies taking what I think is very smart. They're saying, okay, at least I can try to focus where I spend my time. Let's find out which are my real threats, which are the ones that I should be worried about the most, and direct my people to focus on those. And that, I think, is going to drive more collaboration with groups like CISA, FBI, and stuff like that, DHS, who are telling you this is what's happening. The other thing, there's companies that are offering threat intelligence today. There's several companies, particularly in the OT space, it's becoming more popular. I think you're going to start seeing people using more intelligence, threat intelligence, which I hadn't seen much in OT before. Certainly IT has been using it, but not so much in OT. So I've noted at the bottom of this, that's all of those issues are something that Eric's going to talk about in his workshop this afternoon, managing supply chain risks, okay? So all of this is all tied together. So that's part of our one workshop today. Now let me shift the focus to connectivity. You know, as I mentioned, I know I've been following cybersecurity for 10 years, and I've been in the automation business a lot longer than that. Yeah, that's why I don't have hair, is from wearing a hard hat for so many years in plants. You know, one funny thing, and probably anybody that works in the plants, you know, is you wear it so much that when you go out, you tend to bang your head on things because you just don't, you get used to that. I used to always do that. I always say that's why I lost my hair. I kept banging stuff. But anyhow, you know, years ago when we started with cybersecurity, and I think most companies, the focus was, you know, the cybersecurity, the situation was that you had plants, and everybody knows that you can't protect a lot of those assets in the plant because they're old and everything else. So what you do, and most companies did, is said, well, we're going to isolate the plants. We're just going to keep anything from getting into that plant. And then you had some connections, a few connections, maybe to your IT systems to be able to download recipes and things like that, or orders. But they were very limited and very controlled. And then over the years, I think most companies have seen people come and say, well, we're going to put in these devices, or we want to get this data. We want you to send it up to the cloud, to an analytics package. And we started adding these little functions. We want more data from this. We want to do this little thing. So what happened is most companies then, on an incremental basis, case by case, said, okay, well, let's define for me what it is you want to do. I will find a way to protect it. So if the goal is to take data and send it up to the cloud, all right, we'll have a separate network in there. Maybe we'll collect things from devices with Wi-Fi or whatever, but it's completely separated. So it was engineered, all right? And there's a lot of systems that are like that today. Now, the thing that I find, or I think, and I think it's been proven, is this is where the world's headed, this picture right here. Now notice in this case, I don't know if the picture gives away much. It means a lot to me, but not to everybody else. But if you notice, we're starting to see a lot more people trying, we have much more demand for connectivity from remote workers. I use that term very generally. Remote workers are the best example is all the people that worked from home during COVID. Or it's that person who works in the facility who's an expert on something, and he's at home, or he or she is at home. And you say, hey, this just failed. You call them and you say, I want you to be able to connect in and find out what the problem is and fix it as fast as possible, all right? And everybody's learning that has a lot of value. I mean, it can reduce costs, it can service people the same way. So we're finding much more demand and much more value in connecting things. Now, one thing I've seen, and particularly in our digital transformation, is something other analysts at ARC follow in general. A lot of the use cases you'll hear about, there's a lot of new technology, but a lot of the use cases are more really driven by connecting, enabling people in plants to access things outside, enabling people on the outside to access things on the inside, wherever they are, whenever they are, whatever device they have, and things like that. That's the essence of the connected worker problem. Now, that is a much more challenging security problem. And it's more secure. We're going to have a session this afternoon about that. That's the one I'll be managing. Well, actually, it's the next session. But the key point of that is you don't have time for somebody, a rational engineer, security person, architects, to say, okay, let's sit down and define that use case specifically so I can engineer that solution. And the problem is workers can't tell you what it is they need or when they need it until the time comes that they need it. So the problem is you have to kind of come up with a more general answer that says, I'm going to solve the whole problem here. And one thing I think that's going to happen, so you have to kind of shift your mentality from protecting facilities like with perimeters to protecting transactions. And that gets more into the zero trust type strategies that you're seeing today, that IT is using a lot and things like that. So that we see as having a very big impact. Come to this workshop, next workshop, you'll hear a lot of good talk about that. Now, the third topic that I had there was digital transformation. And again, it's funny, I read something where somebody says, well, everybody knows what digital transformation is. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, everybody has their own definition of what digital transformation is, because I find lots of things. And for me personally, it's just that, we've gotten a lot of technology today that everybody is using for whatever thing. And unfortunately, people keep finding ways to use technology that you just say, why in heaven's name would you want to do that, But they do. It's like now it's the tool is there. We're going to find uses for it. So that's happening everywhere in the world, and it's happening in industry, okay? Now, if you look at facilities, that little picture there, that's what you used to think you had to protect. That was your OT system. And it's DCS systems, PLC systems. It's very controlled, very well defined. You probably have old stuff, but it's well defined. That used to be the scope of industrial cybersecurity. But now we're finding that plants, OT systems, they're starting to connect to the cloud. They're connecting to mobile devices, bringing in BYOD and things like that, service people, bringing in devices. More IoT devices that could harbor threats, as well as a lot of things are moving out to the edge systems. Now that we've decided to use all this data, now we find out we can't send it to the cloud enough, so we're going to use it locally. And there's reasons why we're distributing the control. But in any case, that's what the problem is today. And now the cybersecurity has to grow to cover all of those. So the scope that an OT, somebody says, I'm in OT cybersecurity, and this is why somebody who's an OT guy says, hey, I know how to protect my systems, I know my networks, but I don't know all these other things. So you need somebody that knows those other things, all right? Now, one thing I want to make a big point of, and we'll talk more about this. No, we will be talking about some of this. But anyhow, notice that picture. Now here's what IT does. And the point I want to make is IT is facing almost exactly the same kind of things. Everybody's got different issues. Everybody has different constraints. You always hear people say, well, IT's not as bad of a problem because they can just reboot the system. That's a classic kind of a comment. But at the same time, some of them are dealing with 20,000 different devices out there or something like that. So everybody has different challenges, but the basic kinds of things they're protecting are the same. And so I think that what that says is that eventually you're going to need the same kind of security as they have in OT. Doesn't mean you just take solutions and stick them in, but you got to have the same functionality. Now, all of that in those pictures say that line that I had there originally, where I call it the original OT maturity target, which was the standards and stuff, is going to shift way over to where the IT is, okay? Now, that's going to happen over time. As you can tell with no hair, I've been in this business a long time, and I'm not naive. There's a lot of facilities you'll never do that in. Everybody's going to have some system out there. There's no reason to get any data from it. You're just trying to protect it from people coming in. That one you'll be able to protect with what you had. But I think everybody has to, and a lot of companies will say, well, that's my strategy. But then behind the back door, you find out, well, they already have other things connected in there and stuff like that. So I think we recognize that everybody's not going to go to that level for every system. But every company should be looking and saying, what level do I have to target? What could happen in these different systems, and anticipate that. And that means more implementation of active defense, more people, I'll get to that in a minute. And then I mentioned the thing about zero trust. Now, one thing we think is true, and we talked about this, we don't have a session at this forum about it because we did it last year on our virtual forum. And so I recommend you go and take a look at that. But is this thing, we call it IT/OT cybersecurity convergence, and I'm being very precise there. You'll hear a lot of people talking about IT/OT convergence, which is indeed happening. I'm just talking about IT/OT cybersecurity convergence. And when I say that, it's convergence of the people, the processes, and the technologies that are used in IT and OT. And the kinds of changes I think you should anticipate, because I think every company is going to have to look at this in some way or another, is integration and convergence of people, IT and OT cybersecurity teams, as well as increased use of third-party cybersecurity professionals. Cybersecurity processes, I think we're going to see more rigid kind of governance and vulnerability management in OT systems, kind of comparable to IT. Adoption of more standards and stuff like that. I think you're going to see use of more security management tools for things like continuous asset discovery, better asset inventory management, as well as use of tools that kind of give you risk information about where your threats are, what your risks are. And then at the bottom, the security technologies, I think you're going to see more adoption of all kinds of tools that are used in IT today. Again, how that's implemented will vary, but it will have to be implemented. And then the last slide, I think this is my last slide. We've talked about IT/OT cybersecurity convergence a lot, and we've done a lot of research on that in the past in particular. And these are kind of three models that we see, because that term, what that means, varies when I talk about that. Most people think I'm talking about way on the right, where you actually take the OT group and you add it to the IT group, and one person manages it, and it's a cybersecurity group, okay? And indeed, there are companies doing that. I just want to let you know, we had some really good presentations from companies who that is their model today. And they still have OT people, but they literally are working within the IT, or be it IT organization or a separate cybersecurity organization. But there's also a lot way on the left where they're just getting from fighting against each other, IT and OT, to working on just getting more collaboration between the two. And then in the middle, you have this model I call integration, which is where there's certain things in most plants that are pretty much IT. So why not let the IT people take those over? Like a DMZ, stuff in a DMZ, or some of the stuff at level 3 or level 4 kind of solutions. So we're seeing, the model that somebody chooses is going to depend on the company, the needs they have, how they're already organized. There's lots of reasons why different companies will choose different models. But what I always say to companies is, number one, I would say you should anticipate IT/OT convergence, some form of it, and then kind of think of which of those models works best for your company, or even in different facilities. It'll vary in facilities. And then the other comment I always say is, actually, you're going to see all three of those models in companies, because things don't change overnight. So you may say, I'm going to start with the left, and then I'm going to move to that, and move to that. So in a way, it might provide you a little roadmap. So as I mentioned, if you want to, we're happy to talk to you about it. Oh, one thing, I'll talk about it later. Never mind. Is again, we had a lot of sessions, really good sessions on this topic for the last couple years. And so I recommend if you get a chance to look at those videos.